Hi, and welcome to English-Fabule. Are you learning English? Great. Let's learn English with a very interesting story. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment. Let's get started.
John D. Rockefeller is an important person from American history. For a long time, just hearing his name could make people feel afraid. He became the world's first billionaire and is known as the richest person who ever lived. His company was called Standard Oil. It grew to be extremely large and powerful, becoming a monopoly in the oil industry. A monopoly means one company controls almost all the business in a specific area. Standard Oil achieved this power by using very tough methods against other companies. It brutally crushed its competitors, making it almost impossible for them to survive or succeed. Rockefeller used tactics that many people thought were unfair, like secret deals and sometimes even bribes. For him, business was like fighting a war. Because of these ruthless actions, Rockefeller made many powerful enemies. These included other famous businessmen, such as Andrew Carnegie, and even some presidents of the United States who fought against his company's power. What makes his story very interesting is how he started. John D. Rockefeller was born into a poor family in 1839. He did not begin life with money or special advantages. His life shows an incredible journey from deep poverty to amazing wealth and influence. This part of his story can seem inspiring. However, his story also shows a darker side. It is an example of what can happen when great greed and ambition are not controlled. It explores success, but also the serious problems that can arise from wanting too much power and control. 2. A poor boy, John David Rockefeller was born in 1839. His family were poor farmers and did not have much money. They lived in a very small town. John's father was a strange and mysterious man. People called him Devil Bill. He did not often help on the family farm. Instead, he did many unusual things and often left home suddenly. Sometimes he was away for weeks or months. Then he returned with expensive gifts and toys for John and his brothers and sisters. This was confusing for young John. His family lived in an old house, they wore old clothes, and they were often cold and hungry. Their life was difficult, but sometimes they had these moments of luxury when the father came back. The reason was that Bill lived a secret life. He used a different name, Dr. William Livingston, and traveled around. He pretended to be a doctor and sold fake medicines to people who were sick. Because Bill was often away, John's mother needed his help. She taught John about religion and the importance of hard work and duty while they worked together on the farm. John worked very hard. He went to school, but he also helped his mother with the farm work. It was very hard work for a young boy, but it taught him discipline. John felt proud that he could help his family. He also found his own ways to make money. One time he found some wild turkey eggs. He raised the baby birds, and when they grew into turkeys, he sold some for a good profit. He kept the other turkeys to get more eggs. Even though he was young, the money John earned helped his family a lot. But the family's life was not stable. They had to move many times because of Bill's problems. When John was 10 years old, his father was accused of seriously hurting a young woman. The family felt ashamed in public, so they had to pack everything and move away again. After this, Bill secretly married another woman in a different place, using his fake name. He never told John's mother or his other wife. Bill was now home even less than before. John had to take on more responsibility. He became like the head of the family, even while he was still at school. He continued finding ways to earn money and helped manage the family's finances. Finally, the Rockefeller family moved and found a new home in Cleveland, Ohio. John was growing up and thinking about his future. 3. His first work. John was now 16 years old. He wanted to go to college, but his family needed money. His father was often away, and John had to help his mother support his brothers and sisters. College was not possible. John needed to find a job right away. He left school just 2 months before finishing. He started looking for work in Cleveland, Ohio. John wanted a good job, so he went to the biggest companies in the city like railroads and banks, but finding work was difficult. When companies saw he was only 16, they often did not take him seriously. He faced rejection many times. However, John did not give up. After 6 long weeks of searching, he finally found a job. A small company needed an assistant bookkeeper. They liked his neat handwriting and gave him a chance. They told him to start work immediately. John was very happy. He later called September 26th Job Day and celebrated it every year, saying it was more important than his birthday. His first job taught him many important things about business. He learned how to manage money, pay bills, and work with suppliers. He saw how a real company operated. At first, his pay was very low, only about 50 cents a day. But he worked hard, and soon his bosses gave him a raise to $300 per year. This money helped him feel independent from his father. He could now help his mother give the family a more stable life. Even with little money, John started giving about 10% of his earnings to help others. After working as a bookkeeper for 2 years, John felt confident. He learned a lot and started thinking about his future. He became friends with a man named Morris Clark. Morris was older than John and planned to start his own business selling produce, like grain, fish, and meat. Morris asked John to be his partner. John agreed. They saved some money and started their company called Clark and Rockefeller. Starting the business was hard work. They traveled a lot to find customers. John was quiet, but he was a good salesman and people trusted him. Their business grew, but they needed more money to handle more customers. They cleverly told banks they planned to invest a large sum, which made the banks more willing to give them smaller loans. Then the American Civil War started. This war brought more business to companies in the North, including Cleveland. Food prices went up, and Clark and Rockefeller's produce business did very well. Their profits grew quickly. John believed the North should win the war, but he had to support his family. Instead of fighting as a soldier, he paid $300 for another man to fight in his place. By 1862, their company made a profit of $17,000. John was only 23 years old, and he was already successful in his first business venture. 4. Black gold money. For many years, people used oil lamps to light their homes after dark. This oil usually came from whales. But finding and hunting whales was difficult and cost a lot of money. Also, some types of whales were becoming rare because too many were hunted. Everything changed in 1859. In Pennsylvania, people discovered large amounts of crude oil deep in the ground. They learned to use tall wooden structures, called oil derricks, to drill down and bring the oil up. This new way of getting oil was much cheaper and easier than hunting whales. Many people quickly became rich from this discovery. Crude oil was so valuable that it earned the nickname black gold. John learned about this new business. He met a man named Samuel Andrews in Cleveland. Andrews knew a lot about oil and wanted to build an oil refinery. A refinery is a factory that cleans crude oil. Cleveland was not far from the Pennsylvania oil regions. Andrews needed investors to give him money to start his refinery. He had an advantage because he knew a special way to process the crude oil using sulfuric acid. This method purified the oil and turned it into kerosene. Kerosene was much better for lamps because it burned with a brighter light and lasted longer than crude oil. This process was a secret that only a few people knew. John and his business partner, Morris Clark, were doing well with their produce company. They had extra money and decided it was a good idea to invest in something different. They gave Samuel Andrews $4,000 to build his oil refinery. At first, they thought of it as a small side project. They continued to manage their produce business, and Andrews ran the refinery. Building the refinery was quite simple. Because kerosene was such a good product, it started selling very quickly. John looked carefully at the money the businesses were making. After just 1 year, the oil refinery was earning more profit than their main produce company. This success made John and Morris think hard. They made a brave decision. They decided to stop selling produce completely and put all their effort into the oil industry. However, the oil business was not easy. One major challenge was the supply of oil. It was very unpredictable. At that time, oil had only been found in one small area of Pennsylvania. Many worried that it would soon run out. Sometimes new oil wells produced large amounts of oil and the market had too much. When this happened, prices dropped very low, perhaps only 10 cents for a barrel. At other times, it seemed like the wells were becoming empty. Then prices would shoot up, maybe as high as $14 a barrel. The market was very turbulent and changed constantly. John decided it was better to focus only on refining oil, not drilling for it. But the unstable prices and the constant worry about supply were still very stressful. Morris Clark found this uncertainty too much to handle. In 1865, Morris decided he wanted to leave the oil business. He agreed to sell his share of the company to John. John paid him $72,500, which was a very large sum back then. Morris was getting out, but John was taking a big risk, investing even more in the oil business. He truly believed he was bound to be rich. This was a key moment in his life. Just as John bought Morris's share, exciting news arrived. A huge new oil field was discovered in Pennsylvania. This discovery reduced the fear that oil would run out. John felt more confident about his decision to go all in on oil, but he knew the market was still very competitive. 5. A big oil company. After buying his partner's share of the business, John got married. His wife shared his strong religious beliefs. Even though John was making more money now, they lived a simple life. He bought a normal house in Cleveland and they started their family there. With his home life settled, John focused completely on his business. He gave the company a new name, Standard Oil. He soon built a second oil refinery and started selling his main product, kerosene, in other countries too. The business was growing quickly, and John realized he needed help managing it all. He found a new partner named Henry Flagler. Henry was similar to John in many ways. He was smart, worked hard, and had big plans, but Henry had a tougher view of business. He believed that business was like war. To win, you had to crush your competitors completely. John started to think this way too. At this time, the oil refining business was very competitive. Many companies were trying to sell kerosene. It was easy to refine oil, so Standard Oil's product was not special anymore. John and Henry needed a plan to beat the other companies. They decided to make secret agreements with the railroad companies. Railroads were very important because they moved the crude oil to the refineries and the finished kerosene to the cities where people bought it. Three big railroad companies moved most of the oil: the New York Central, the Erie, and the Pennsylvania Railroad. An opportunity came when the Pennsylvania Railroad decided to stop carrying oil to Cleveland. This was bad news for the other two railroads, the New York Central and the Erie, because they lost business. John and Henry saw that these two railroads needed help. They used this situation to make deals. John promised the Erie Railroad lots of business. In return, Standard Oil got a very large discount on shipping costs, paying much less than the official price. He made a similar deal with the New York Central Railroad. If Standard Oil sent 60 train car loads of oil every day, they would pay a much lower price per barrel than other companies. These special low prices were called rebates, and they were kept secret. Other oil companies had to pay the full, higher price to ship their oil on the same trains. John and Henry now had a big advantage. Because Standard Oil paid less to ship its kerosene, it could sell it for a lower price and still make money. They started a price war. They lowered their prices again and again. Competitors had to lower their prices too, but because their shipping costs were higher, they started losing money. Soon, many competing oil companies went bankrupt because they could not afford to sell kerosene so cheaply. When a competitor failed, Standard Oil often bought the company for a very low price. This way, Standard Oil removed competition and grew larger. At that time, these secret deals and price wars were not against the law. However, many people thought these methods were unfair. They helped big companies like Standard Oil destroy smaller businesses. Through these actions, Standard Oil became bigger and more powerful than ever before. 6. Winning against others. The oil business faced difficult times. Prices for oil dropped very low, sometimes costing less than water. Many companies that cleaned or refined oil were losing money. It was estimated that around 90% of these businesses were not making a profit. John Rockefeller worried that the whole industry might fail, even though his own company, Standard Oil, was doing well. He believed a big change was needed to control the situation. John decided to work together with Tom Scott, the president of the powerful Pennsylvania Railroad. They had been rivals before, but now they planned a secret group called the South Improvement Company, or SIC. This group included the biggest railroads and a small number of the largest oil refiners, including Standard Oil. The plan was secret and quite ruthless. Members of the sick would get large discounts, called rebates, on the cost of shipping their oil on the railroads. In return, they promised to use only these railroads. But the deal also hurt companies outside the group. When competitors shipped oil, Standard Oil would receive money back from the railroad. These were called drawbacks. This meant competitors paid higher prices, and some of that money went straight to Rockefeller. The railroads also agreed to share secret information about competitors' shipments with John. This allowed Standard Oil to know exactly what its rivals were doing and sell oil for cheaper prices. Companies left out of the sick had almost no chance to survive. John believed this plan was necessary to save the oil industry from too much competition, which drove prices too low. However, news about the secret deal leaked out. People became very angry when they learned that railroad prices had suddenly doubled. They protested in the streets, sometimes violently. They damaged railroad tracks and Standard Oil property. The oil miners also stopped supplying oil to the sick members. Without oil, the refineries were useless. Only 2 months after it started, the sick plan failed completely. It was embarrassing for John and made many people dislike him. But John did not give up. He decided to take control of the industry openly, using force instead of secret deals. The failure of the sick had made many smaller oil refiners scared. They worried that Standard Oil still had secret deals with the railroads, even though it was not true. John used this fear. In a short period of only 6 weeks, known as the Cleveland Massacre, he bought 22 of the 26 rival oil companies in Cleveland. He often paid very low prices because the owners were afraid to compete. He showed them Standard Oil's strong financial records to prove his company could survive longer than theirs. Owners had to choose: sell their company cheaply and leave the industry forever, or join Standard Oil. Many chose to join, bringing their knowledge to John's company. Soon after, in 1873, a major economic crisis started in the United States. Banks failed and the country faced a depression that lasted 6 years. Demand for oil fell and prices dropped even lower. Most oil companies suffered badly. But Standard Oil, because it was well managed and had modern equipment, continued to make a profit. John saw this crisis as another chance to grow. He started buying struggling refineries not just in Cleveland, but all across the country, in places like Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, and New York. If owners did not want to sell, John used tough methods. Sometimes Standard Oil bought all the available barrels needed to store oil, or all the machines needed to refine it. Other times, they booked all the space on the railroads for months, so competitors could not ship their product. He also pressured railroads to charge his competitors higher shipping fees, pushing them towards failure. Then, he would offer to buy their failing businesses for very little money. To gain even more control and lower costs, John built a huge network of pipelines. These pipes carried raw oil to Standard Oil refineries and then carried the finished kerosene to cities. This network reduced the need for railroads and made Standard Oil more efficient. Because the pipelines spread out like the arms of an octopus, the company got the nickname the Octopus. By the time the economy started to get better, Standard Oil controlled about 90% of all oil refining in the United States. John Rockefeller, still in his 30s, was the king of the oil industry, but his tough methods created many enemies and a very negative public image. 7. More money, more power. Standard Oil was already very powerful in the oil refining business, but John D. Rockefeller wanted more control. His company started to change its strategy. Before, it focused only on refining oil. This is called horizontal integration, meaning buying similar companies. Now, Standard Oil wanted to control every step of the oil business. This is called vertical integration. Rockefeller planned for his company to own the land where oil was found, drill the oil, transport it through its own pipelines and trains, refine it, and sell it directly to customers. He wanted to remove anyone else involved in the process. Around this time, a large amount of crude oil was discovered in Ohio. Standard Oil quickly bought land there and started drilling. However, there was a big problem. The oil from Ohio had a very strong, bad smell even after refining. People called it skunk oil and did not want to buy it. The price for this oil was very low, only 15 cents per barrel. Many companies stopped trying to sell Ohio oil. But Rockefeller saw an opportunity. He hired chemists who were scientists specializing in materials. After about a year, these chemists found a way to remove the sulfur that caused the bad smell. Now, Standard Oil was the only company selling this cheaper, good oil from Ohio. This gave them a big advantage. Soon, even more oil was found in other parts of the United States, like Oklahoma, Texas, Kansas, and California. It became clear that America had huge amounts of petroleum underground. At the same time, a new invention was becoming popular, the automobile. Cars started to replace horses. These cars needed fuel, and that fuel was gasoline. Gasoline was actually a waste product made when crude oil was refined into kerosene. Before cars, companies often threw gasoline away. Standard Oil realized they could sell this waste product. Selling gasoline brought in a lot of extra profit, especially as more people bought cars. Rockefeller's personal fortune was growing incredibly large. He realized he needed help managing his investments outside of Standard Oil. He hired a man named Frederick Gates, who had been a church minister. It seemed like a strange choice, but Gates was very good with money and investments. Rockefeller later said Gates was one of the best businessmen he ever met. Rockefeller's son, John Jr., had recently finished university. Rockefeller wanted his son to learn from Gates. So John Jr. started working with Frederick Gates, learning how to invest money wisely and how to negotiate deals. Together, they improved Rockefeller's investments significantly. One of their biggest investments was buying a large area of land in Minnesota called the Mesabi Range. This land contained a huge amount of high-quality iron ore. Iron ore is the main material needed to make steel. The most powerful man in the steel industry was Andrew Carnegie. When Carnegie heard that Rockefeller was buying iron ore mines, he worried that Rockefeller planned to start making steel and compete with him. Rockefeller, helped by Gates and John Jr., started mining the iron ore. They sold it for lower prices than Carnegie, taking some of his customers. Carnegie faced a problem because he had not invested enough in his own iron ore supplies, and he needed more. Carnegie decided to make a deal with Rockefeller. They agreed that Carnegie would buy a large amount of iron ore from Rockefeller's mines every year. Carnegie also agreed to transport his ore using Rockefeller's railroads. In return, Rockefeller gave Carnegie secret discounts, or rebates, on the railroad transport costs. This was similar to the secret deals Rockefeller used to make with railroads for his oil business, but now he owned the railroads giving the discount. They also agreed that Carnegie would not buy land near the Mesabi Range, and Rockefeller would not build a steel factory. This deal helped both men make more money and hurt their competitors. News of the deal between Rockefeller and Carnegie excited investors. Then, a very powerful banker named J.P. Morgan had an idea. He wanted to combine Rockefeller's iron mines and Carnegie's steel company into one giant business. He planned to call it U.S. Steel. Morgan approached Rockefeller to buy the Mesabi iron mines. Rockefeller told Morgan to talk to his son, John Jr., who was only 27 years old. Morgan thought negotiating with the young man would be easy. But John Jr. was smart and confident. He made Morgan name the price first. Morgan offered $88.5 million in shares of the new U.S. Steel Company. John Jr. accepted. Morgan then bought Carnegie's steel business too. U.S. Steel became the world's first company worth over $1 billion. Rockefeller owned a large part of it through his shares, making him even richer. His wealth was now spread across oil, iron, steel, and railroads, giving him enormous power in American industry. 8. Old Man gives back. John D. Rockefeller stopped managing Standard Oil every day, but he did not sell his part of the company. He still owned many shares. Around this time, cars started to become popular. Cars needed gasoline, which came from refining oil. Standard Oil sold a lot of gasoline, and Rockefeller's wealth continued to grow, even though he was retired. However, the company and Rockefeller himself had a very bad public image. People remembered the tough ways Standard Oil beat its competitors. A writer named Ida Tarbell wrote many articles about Standard Oil's history. Her father had lost his oil business because of Rockefeller's actions years ago. Tarbell wrote about the company's secret deals, how it pushed competitors out of business, and how it sometimes paid politicians for help. She also wrote about Rockefeller's father and his difficult past. Many people read these articles. They learned about the dark side of Standard Oil. Rockefeller did not say anything about the articles, and his silence made people angrier. He became known as a symbol of greed and unfair business. The President of the United States at the time was Theodore Roosevelt. He saw how angry the public was with Standard Oil and Rockefeller. Roosevelt decided to use this public anger. He promised voters he would fight against powerful companies, called monopolies, that controlled too much of an industry. After he won the election again, President Roosevelt started a government investigation into Standard Oil. The government took Standard Oil to court. They said the company was an illegal monopoly because it controlled most of the oil business in the country. They charged Standard Oil with using unfair low prices to hurt competitors, making secret deals with railroads for lower shipping costs, and paying money to politicians. It was a very big court case. There were 21 lawsuits in different states, plus one huge lawsuit from the federal government. The government showed a lot of evidence, with over 1,000 documents and 444 people telling the court what they knew. The evidence showed that Standard Oil controlled 87% of oil refining and charged very high prices because there was no competition. It also showed the company broke laws. In May 1911, the Supreme Court made its decision. Standard Oil was guilty. The court ordered the company to be broken up into many smaller, separate companies. Rockefeller's enemies like Ida Tarbell and President Roosevelt were happy. They thought Rockefeller's empire was finished, but something surprising happened. Rockefeller owned about 1/4 of Standard Oil. When it was broken up into 34 different companies, he received shares in all of them. Soon, people wanted to buy shares in these new oil companies. The value of Rockefeller's shares went up very quickly. In fact, the value almost tripled. Breaking up Standard Oil actually made Rockefeller much richer. He became close to being the world's first billionaire. After the court case, Rockefeller decided to spend the rest of his life giving his money away. This is called philanthropy. He had already given away some money throughout his life, about 10% of what he earned. Now he wanted to do it in a big way. In 1913, he started the Rockefeller Foundation. His son, John Jr., and his trusted helper, Frederick Gates, helped him run it. Rockefeller personally gave away more than $540 million. The Rockefeller Foundation gave away billions more over the next century, and it still gives money today. The foundation focused on helping medicine and education. The money supported doctors and scientists searching for cures for diseases like hookworm and malaria. It helped save many lives. The money also built schools and universities in the United States and other countries. John D. Rockefeller's life story is complicated. He was a brilliant businessman who built a huge company. But he was also ruthless and used harsh methods that hurt many people. Later in life, he became one of the most generous philanthropists in history, giving away enormous amounts of money to help society. People still discuss whether his good actions made up for his bad ones.
Hey there! Just a second before you go. If you learned something new today, please give this video a like, write your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to the channel. It only takes a second, and it really, really helps to create even better English videos for you. Your support means the world. Thank you.